Welcome into another edition of the At Large Bid Bearcats podcast, brought to you as always by Riverfront U. Tonight I'm joined by 1530's ESPN's Mo Ager. Mo, welcome into the show.
Ryan, how are you, buddy?
Not bad. I'd be a lot better if Cincinnati wasn't in the middle of a 4-game losing streak and coming off the type of losses they've had these last two games. Most recently, 54-40 loss to Kansas. Once again, did not shoot the ball well. Felt like they defended well enough to win the game. What were your overall takes from that 54-40 loss?
Well, probably a lot like yours. If you would have told me on Saturday morning they're going to hold Kansas to 54, I would have said they win and probably win reasonably comfortably by 8 to 10 points. I think the thing for me is it felt like a bottoming out of something that we have talked about now for a while. You know, it's one thing to say, God, 40 points in 40 minutes, that's awful. It's something else to say, God, you know what? That was an extreme example of something that we have been talking about now for a while, and that this team is just offensively not very good. And, you know, I talked about this a little bit on my show today. You know, it's one thing to talk about how they're not scoring when they're not winning, but they really offensively, they were struggling against Xavier when they won that game. They were struggling against Dayton when they won that game. And, you know, for me, aside from the emotional after effect of beating both of those teams, and aside from what having those victories on your resume might represent when you're looking at Cincinnati's NCAA tournament bona fides, the basketball part of it from an offensive perspective was not very good. They shot less than 40% in both of those games. And so going into conference play, I wondered, can this team get going offensively? And the answer, unfortunately, so far has been no. And so it wasn't just the Kansas game. It wasn't just the Baylor game. It's really everything since Thanksgiving from an offensive perspective has been pretty troubling. And I'm starting to think that maybe from an offensive perspective, at least, this is what they are. Are they going to score 40 points in the game again? Probably not. Are they going to score 48 points in the game again? My guess is no. But are they going to score enough in the Big 12 to be able to win the sort of games that we said coming into the season they were capable of winning? And if the answer is no, are they going to be able to do the other stuff well enough? You know, the Baylor game got out of hand because not only were they bad on offense, they were porous defensively. And so can they, if you assume that offensively they're just going to have to overcome what they are they good enough on the defensive end? Are they good enough situationally? Are they going to play hard enough? Which, you know, people have called into question the team's effort over the last couple of games. I think that's kind of where we are now with 80% of the Big 12 schedule still in front of them. If you do not believe this team can improve that much offensively, do you believe they can do the other stuff well enough to figure out a way to make the NCAA tournament? That's kind of where I am. Again, I don't think this is a team that's going to routinely score in the 40s, right. But I'm starting to wonder if they had the sort of team that's going to routinely score in the 70s. And if the answer is no, they're not, and right now it doesn't appear that they're going to be able to do that, can they do the other stuff well enough?
When you look at these offensive struggles, Kansas game, for example, your three primary ball handlers of Jizzle James, Simas Lukosius, Dede Thomas are combined 3 of 24 from the field, of 10 from 3. When you think about these offensive struggles, how much do you think it can be attributed to the lack of ball movement and the lack of point guard play with getting others involved? Or is it a case of just, guys not making shots?
It's everything. I mean, I thought the shots they had against Kansas were pretty good.
Yeah.
None better than Arrington Page having a chance to throw down a one-handed dunk wide open with the team down 3. And it kind of felt like that sequence right there was ball game, right? Because Kansas gets the rebound, they go the other way. I think the Bearcat players thought they had scored, and KU scores, and suddenly what's going to be a 1-point game is now a 5-point game. I think it's been a little bit of everything. I think it's been in the last 2 games, or the last 2 home games, I think in particular, they've had a lot of wide open looks, man, against Arizona and Kansas, looks and shots that you're okay with the players who are taking, and they just haven't gone down. But I think I begin the conversation with Jizzle James, and I'll extend it to just the overall function of the offense. I wish they would initiate their offense earlier in the shot clock.
Yeah.
Because it feels to me like there's a couple of different things. Number one, it's hard to play pick and roll when the other team doesn't respect your big's ability to beat you with the ball.
Right.
I think you saw it with Kansas. I think good teams are going to say to Aziz Bandago, go ahead and catch it. Because if it's not a lob, we're not sure you can score against one of our guys, whether you have the height advantage or not. So it feels like teams are taking that away because they're saying to Aziz, throw it to him. Throw it to him because we don't think he can score in the paint against us consistently. So, but more than anything, I just want to see them start the offense earlier on the shot clock. It feels like, and this is a very sort of basic way of putting it, like defenses can kind of set themselves, and I think it's a lot easier to play defense when you're not on your heels. And this offense just doesn't seem like it puts anybody on its heels. Number one, because I feel like they start things too late, and number two, they just haven't gotten their point guards going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
And Jizzle James, nothing against Day Thomas, but like he's the engine, and he's the guy that if you would have said a year ago, why is this going to be even better in 2024 and 2025? Jizzle's coming back, and he's making a significant leap, and he hasn't been awful, but he hasn't been as good, and he hasn't been as explosive as we hoped. And you're looking for people who can create their own shot. Like Simas Lukosius, for all of his attributes, is just not a guy who's probably going to create his own shot.
Right.
But Jizzle, if he's not creating his own shot, should be able to create scoring opportunities for other guys. And I just don't feel like that's happening. And if you want to blame the design of the half-court offense, fine. If you want to say, look, West should just let these guys play faster, that's fine. If you just want to say Jizzle hasn't developed to the point that we would like by now, I think that's fine too. I don't think it's any one thing, but when it's a combination of things, you get 40 points, 48 points, and a team that offensively has kind of lost its way over the last, not just couple of games, but the last number of weeks.
You kind of hit on it. With the lack of getting downhill, they're currently 353rd out of 362 teams in free throw shooting at 63%. Do you think this team has kind of become predictable in how to defend them with, attacking the ball screens defensively, defending the lob, kind of face guard Simas because he hasn't really been able to create his own shot, and then just letting everyone else shoot and dealing with the results?
Yeah, I don't think that good teams defensively are overly concerned with UC's bigs at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
You can throw lobs to Dylan, and you can throw lobs to Aziz and maybe Arrington Page as well. And that's going to work sometimes. But, I think going back to the crosstown shootout, there was a stretch where every half-court 2-point bucket was an alley-oop.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, those are awesome, but that can't be your offense's bread and butter. Like, you've got to do more. So, to me, it sort of starts with that. And then they just can't get, Connor Hickman obviously has been hobbling around and didn't play against Kansas, but the guys that you're hoping to get open, for whatever reason, the offense just can't get them open. And that's a problem. Teams have obviously really, really focused in on Simas Lukosius. You could see the way teams are defending him, but it's like in football, take this away. All right, we'll do this. They're taking Simas away. There's no, within the structure of their offense, it doesn't feel like there's a counter to it. All right, you took away Simas. So what's the antidote to that says you're not going to be able to crowd Simas Lukosius? You're not going to be able to take away his outside shot because we're coming at you with this. I haven't seen that yet. And I think more than anything, and this is again a broad statement, it feels like they have a lot of players that Big 12 teams would like. Like there's Dylan Mitchell's a Big 12 player, was at Kansas. Arrington Page has played in 2 Power 4 leagues right now. Which team wouldn't like Jizzle James? Day Thomas would get minutes, I think, on a good team. Dan Skillings, who wouldn't want him? I think they have nice pieces. They just haven't made the pieces fit.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're 2 months into this now, and you're still, I think, on a game-to-game basis, wondering who's going to give you what, and wondering, who's going to go get a bucket for you. Who's going to go get keep the other team from going on an 8-0 run because they just go get a bucket, or who's going to stop, we haven't scored our last 5 possessions. They're just going to go get you one, or go get to the free throw line. There's no one who does that. It's so hard to talk about because it's not when you score 40 points in a game, and when you go through what they're going through offensively, it's no one person's fault. It's no one thing. It's kind of everything right now. Like, you could say, boy, the point guards don't create opportunities, and they can't get CMOS open. And when he is open, he's not making his shots. And teams don't respect their bigs' ability to score one-on-one. And you can't really run a lot of pick and roll because teams are going to let Aziz catch it. Like, to me at least, there's just so many different things that it adds up to a team that offensively is where they are, unfortunately, for lack of a better way of putting it.
When you look at this team, and you kind of hit on it, they definitely lack a true alpha. Dan Stillings has tried at times to take over, but I don't know that he's been aggressive enough and is comfortable in that role. I think he needs to be a little bit more selfish. And I also think that Dylan Mitchell is a guy that has shown the ability to explode past a defender and get to the rim. And I don't think they've done that enough. With that in mind, do you think it would benefit this offense to kind of do what they did last year when they removed Vic from the lineup and went with more of, 2 guards with Day and Jizzle, and then 2 wings with CMOS and Dan, and dropping Dylan down to the 5? Or do you think they would have too many issues defensively with that type of lineup?
It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole, right? Like, you could solve some of the offensive issues by doing that. And I think Wes has played Jizzle and Day together a lot more in the first half of the season than he did last year. I mean, I think we've seen those guys on the floor together a fair amount. Right now, the only way you can win games is by getting stops. And so, do you compromise the thing that your team might have to hang its hat on in order to fix what's broken? It's a good question. Right? Like, it's hard to imagine, you don't have rim protection without Aziz Bandaogo.
Right.
So, okay, we're going to become easier to score against when we're not a very good offensive team, but we're not a good offensive team. And so maybe we have to figure out ways to improve that. And it might have to come at the expense of what we do on the defensive end. I don't know. And so,
if you knew, you'd probably be on the sidelines, right?
I'd have a clipboard. I guess for me, there's 2 things that one, that I would like to see him try, and 2, that you would like to just see happen. One would be, I just like to see them run. I just like to see what it would look like if for a half they said to Jizzle and Day and everybody else, like, we're going to run. We're going to force the tempo. And Aziz, I just need you to be a rim to rim runner, right? I need you to just run rim to rim. And if maybe we sacrifice a little rebounding because of that, we're going to run, and we're going to play a lot of guys, and we're just going to force the tempo, and we're going to get Jizzle going downhill, and we're going to get Day going downhill, and we're just going to see what that looks like. It might be a mess. They might handle the ball so poorly that I eat my words, but I think we would all agree that the way they're playing right now is not working. So I'm sort of to the point where it's like, just try it for a half, and just say, screw it. We're going to go run. We're going to get in transition, and we're going to just try to run teams out of the gym, and at least, not run at a breakneck pace, but get to a point where when we have half court possessions, we're starting them more quickly. We're going downhill. We're getting guys at the basket. Again, maybe it falls apart. And the other thing is, for the most part, they've defended pretty well. I don't think anybody had a major issue with how they defended against Kansas. I thought there were stretches. Their defense got them back into the game against Arizona. The Baylor game was a little bit of a different story. They've defended well. What they haven't done is really turn teams over and scored off of it. And so I can't help but wonder, you think of some of the plays that Dylan Mitchell made against Arizona that enabled them to get back into the game. I don't know if there's a way to, you're going to speed the game up, and you're probably going to kill yourself in certain instances if you leave a guy open. But I'd love to see them use some schemes that enable them to create more turnovers that they could score off of and then run, because it's one thing to be good defensively, but they don't score off other teams' misses. They don't run off of other teams' misses, and they don't create enough turnovers that they score off of. And again, they may not have the personnel to do that, but I think when you're 0-4 in the league and you've lost 4 straight and your season's kind of hanging in the balance, you got to try some stuff. And so I'd like to see them try some things that enable them to utilize their defense to turn quickly into instant offense.
Yeah, on the kind of flip side of that, as you mentioned, 309th in tempo, 207th in fast break points during the preseason. Wes, discuss the depth, discuss that he wanted his team to play fast. How much do you think the lack of bench production has kind of contributed to the game plan each game? With really pressing and getting up and down the floor.
Yeah, I mean, the faster you play, the more guys you're going to have to play.
Right.
And, Connor Hickman obviously didn't play against Kansas, and, we'll see about his availability moving forward. But I guess I come back to what they're doing right now with the players they are playing isn't working. And again, this isn't a reaction to 40 against Kansas. It's a reaction to, not to take anything away from Grambling, but really the last 6 games they've played against, I'll lump Dayton into the conversation, high major competition. Offensively, they've not been very good. Mm-hmm. This is not a 1-game thing or a 2-game thing or a 1-week thing. This is something that has happened over a lengthy stretch of time in the context of a college basketball season. And so you could shake your head at, well, you can't play fast because they don't have enough guys, and fine, but then what? And I don't know what the then what is. Like, if it's they can't play fast, Mo, okay, they have to execute better in the half court and the shots have to fall. Okay, how? How's that going to happen? And right now, I don't think anybody has the answer to that. I certainly hope that West does. And by the way, they tried some stuff on Saturday. They played Josh Reed was the first guy off the bench.
Yeah.
I didn't have that on my bingo card. They,
plus 9 at the half with CJ Frederick out there.
Yeah. CJ Frederick at one point led the team in rebounds, which is not something you expect. Like, he tried some stuff, but unfortunately, when you're doing that at this stage of the season, it kind of reeks of desperation. It kind of reeks of, dude, I'm out of ideas. Let's try this. And I don't blame him. I mean, I at some point you have to try different things, and he did. And that's what makes it frustrating. Different things were done, and yet the results were painful and unfortunately very familiar.
Fans are obviously frustrated, but in the grand scheme of things, the last 3 games you've played, the preseason number 1, number 4, number 5 team in the Big 12 rankings, all 3 were preseason top 10 teams. Do you think that maybe fans had unrealistic expectations after playing so well in the non-conference in terms of a 10-1 record?
Well, I don't know if it's and I'll count myself among them. I don't know if we had unrealistic expectations based on the non-conference. I think we had heightened expectations based on, number one, all the good players from last year's team came back. I mean, right. I remember when they played Indiana State, driving home from Terre Haute, and mentally I was kind of doing all right, let's rank the guys in order from 1 to the bottom. Who do I want to come back the most? And all the guys at the top of that list came back. And I am probably in the minority, but I viewed last season as a success because I felt like they looked like and felt like a Big 12 team. They were competitive, and they had 1 game they lost by more than 10 points. So I'm going, all right, year 1 was about fitting in and take the nucleus of that team that fit in, add pieces from outside, and here we go. And then you look at the pieces from outside. Arrington Page, a guy that they had coveted before he went to USC, is a power 4 player. Dylan Mitchell was at Texas. That's a power 4 player. So you were adding, I know Connor Hickman came from Bradley, but you were adding to a good nucleus of a team that fit in the Big 12 last year, some some guys from, some guys that other Big 12 teams would want, including a guy who played in the Big 12 last year. So to me, all the optimism and the heightened expectations were based on that. I said on our radio show last week, I feel like expectations for this year were based on last year because, all right, they fit in first. And now you do more than fit in, and you've added some players to your team that are better than the guys that they replaced, and you brought back all your players that you wanted to bring back. So the expectations for me this season were based on that. And then, they lost just one game in the non-conference. They played 3 true road games. They played a neutral site game against a good Dayton team. In late November, when they were doing what they did to Georgia Tech, they were feeding into the heightened expectations. And even though offensively they didn't play great against Xavier and Dayton, they still won those games. Right. And beat a Dayton team that had beaten Marquette the week before and looked so good in Maui. And I know Xavier's not very good this year, but still beat a team that has been their nemesis and been such a thorn in their side. And so if you took all of that, last season, the offseason, the guys they brought back, the guys they added, and the results they achieved in the non-conference, I can certainly understand why you went into Big 12 play feeling like this team was going to be an NCAA tournament team, because that's where I was, that they could get to maybe 12 wins in the league. And so are we guilty of overrating them? Well, I mean, as it stands right now, sure. And I think if you look at the non-conference schedule, you could certainly wonder, like, was it good enough to really prepare them for the Big 12? But yeah, I think all of us to a degree were guilty of overrating them or heightening our expectations just a little bit too much. The good news is they have 16 games to go in the regular season, so there's lots of time and there's plenty of opportunities for good wins. But I think we would all agree that the stretch that's going to define the season is what they have coming up, because Colorado, Arizona State, Texas Tech, BYU, and Utah, these are winnable games. If you go to warrennolan.com, which offers predicted results based on net rankings and other metrics, they have the Bearcats winning 3 of them, and the 2 games they lose, they have them losing by 2 points and 4 points. That illustrates there are winnable games here. If they can win 4 of their next 5, game on. If they can win 3 of their next 5, all right, at least they still have a heartbeat. Shy of that, if you look at who they play later in the season, it gets to be a little bit more difficult to do the math. But I'm really more interested in the basketball part of it. I'm interested in how they get this offense fixed. I'm interested in how they overcome not having a good offense. And I know Wes Miller and his staff are scrambling to come up with the answers to those questions.
A Fifth Third Arena low, 40 points on Saturday. Fans booing the team at the end of the game after Kansas closes the game on a 16-3 run. Wes's post-game comments kind of reeked of, I love my team. If you don't, that's fine. We don't really care. We're going to continue trying. Did you kind of get the vibes that Wes might be feeling pressure from the fans, or do you think he's more embracing it as motivation to get his team better and performing at the level that's expected?
I think I always feel like a coach in a situation like there's nothing that he would have said that would have made everybody happy, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, what could he have said that would have made people go to bed on Saturday night feeling great? Like nothing. The team scored 40 points. Fans booed. What's he going to say? So I think in that regard, he's kind of in a no-win situation. I think what he did was he went out of his way to acknowledge it. How could you not? You know, he said, look, I'm a human being. He knows what's out there. I'm sure if he doesn't hear about it or read it directly, he's certainly aware of what's being said. I think he's certainly aware of the heightened expectations, aware of the skepticism and the frustration that's out there. And so I think he acknowledged it. And then I think he did what most coaches would do in that situation, is publicly try to talk about how he can use it and turn it into a positive, use it as motivation, because what's he going to say that's going to make anybody feel any better? I do think there's maybe something to the suggestion that on Saturday the team was pressing a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, 3 straight losses. The energy in the building on Saturday, you were there, was weird. right? Like I think you hate to play a game like that against Kansas feeling like, holy crap, we have to win this one.
Right. Yeah.
And I wonder I wonder, especially given how they played against Baylor, I wonder how much of that impacted their performance. I'm not making excuses for them. It's not been a good offensive team. They have a lot to fix. And again, they had some shots that, like, two of them, 2 threes rim in and out. Arrington has the missed dunk. Like, they had some stuff go against them that if the ball goes their way, who knows what happens with the game. But I do think on Saturday that you're being reasonable if you wonder if the outside noise and just the players and everybody understanding the reality of the situation they were in on Saturday caused guys to press just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. And I think the energy in the building, I'm not going to blame anybody for not cheering, for booing, for standing. Like, do what you want, man. But I think that vibe in the building was unhelpful on Saturday. That's not to say that the vibe was that you should have been yelling your face off like the team was winning by 20 points. Like, I understand the booing, and I certainly can understand the apprehension, and I'll be the first to tell you, like, I watched that game from a very weird perspective where I didn't have a lot of confidence they were going to win. The frustration of the season is starting to wear on me. Oh my God, are we going to talk about this team starting 0-4? Like, I felt it, but I feel like the vibe in the building and the 0-3 start and the 3-game losing streak and what's out there and what's at stake, it certainly didn't have a positive impact on the team. And I think it's quite possible, we're never going to know for sure, that maybe it had a negative impact on the team.
You've been around Cincinnati basketball for a while, both covering the team and also as a fan. So I'm going to throw this out for you to get your thoughts on it. Mick in year 4, 19-16, missed the NCAA tournament. Had Deontay Vaughn, Lance Stevenson, Rashad Bishop, Nancy Gates, and Ibrahimo Thomas. Do you see any similarities between that team and this year's Cincinnati team? And for what it's worth, I know you're not a fan of comparisons, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts on the two.
Well, it's funny. It's like you read my mind, because I had a long car drive today. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about I was thinking about the team, and I was thinking about, what I was going to say, and whether it's right or wrong, any coach at any successful program is going to be compared to the people that came before him. And so you can't help but do it, right? Like, Mick, year 4 in a behemoth league, Wes, year 4 in a behemoth league, both trying to, in different eras, rebuild the program from when they took it over. That 4th year for Mick Cronin was the Lance Stevenson year. And that year, if you remember, they played in the Maui Invitational. They played really well. Should have won it, crept into the top 25. They had Lance Stevenson. And I think we all felt like, all right, this is the year. And it wasn't. Now, the difference between that team and this team is, we knew Lance was one and done. He was going to go to the NBA, and he went on to the NBA and had a successful career. I don't know who the NBA guy is that can do the same on this team. But I remember often thinking 2 things that we have addressed. One, okay, maybe we overrated this team. Maybe we underrated how long it really takes for a coach to get things going. Now, back then, this is before the portal. This is before NIL. It's a different era. But also I remember thinking, like, God, Lance Stevenson's really talented, but the pieces don't fit. And if you remember that year, like, Mick had a game where he tried and play the point, and he's going to play the 2. And then they had a game where he wasn't really playing point guard. He was more point forward, bringing it up. And I mean, he was trying all sorts of different stuff. And I remember, there were some really good players on that team. There were players who would go on to play in the NCAA tournament the following year, but it just, in real time, we got to like January, February, and it's like, you know what? The pieces don't fit.
Yep.
Now, what happened? Well, the next year they made the tournament. Lance Stevenson was gone, and then the program kind of took off. 9 straight years making the tournament, made the Sweet 16 in 2012. But year 5 for Mick really felt like all right, dude, like, come on, man, in the Big East. And I remember they lost a game late in the season to Marquette that year, which really made people wonder, okay, are they going to blow this again? And there was a real heightened sense of, dude, Mick, like we're out of time here. Like you've got to get this figured out. And they did. They got the tournament, won a game in the tournament that year, beat Missouri. I think a similar dynamic is possibly in play here, where you look at this year's team and you go, okay, we overrated it a little bit. Mm-hmm. We might have underestimated how tough the league was going to be. And you know what? The individual pieces are good, but they just haven't made them fit. And next year, and I know no one's going to want to hear that. I don't want to say it. Next year is the year where you're really going to judge whether or not Wes is the guy. I know there are folks who want him gone now. I know there are folks who look at this and go, okay, at the end of the season, it's year 4. You got to move on. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that should happen. And I don't want that to happen. I got to be honest with you. Like in college basketball now, when you get rid of a coach, you're starting from scratch. Now, you can have immediate results. Mark Pope at Kentucky has, and Pat Kelsey, who's a great coach, is having a real positive impact in Louisville, where they're 5-1 now in the ACC. But you know, you had to essentially start from scratch with John Brannon. You had to essentially start from scratch with Wes Miller. You've got some really good players coming in who I would guess aren't going to come if Wes isn't here. So, you know, be careful what you wish for. Oh, and by the way, that's a 10-figure amount of money that you're going to have to pay the coach to go away as well. I want to give Wes a chance to see this through. I think he's earned it. I think he's had his failures, and I think he would be the first to admit that. But if you and I are having a conversation at the end of the year and they're on the outside looking in and Wes Miller is still the coach, I think we're going to be talking about a real put up or shut up season for Wes next year. And I feel like then we make the comparison to Mick Cronin in 2011 when he was coaching with, I don't think the knowledge that he was going to get fired if he didn't make the tournament, but a very clear understanding like, dude, I'm at Cincinnati. At some point, I got to get to the tournament and I got to keep going back. I think a similar dynamic would be in play next year. I'm not giving up on this season by any stretch. There is a lot of time. And again, let's see how they emerge from these next 5 games. But I'd be lying to you if I told you I didn't spend some time this morning. It's funny you mentioned 2010 because I was thinking about it today. An NIT team, a decent collection of players, but in that league, in that season, the pieces just didn't fit. And I've said that often to myself and to others since Saturday, that there's a lot of pieces that I really like. They just so far, offensively at least, haven't fit. And if we're saying that at the end of the year, then I think the conversation about next year and West for a lot of fans is going to change pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. You mentioned the next 5 games. I'm going to take it a little bit further. The next 9 games. You get Colorado and Arizona State. You follow that up with a home game against Texas Tech. You have BYU and Utah twice, at UCF and West Virginia. Favored in 8 out of 9 of those games by ESPN's analytics. How many games of that stretch do you feel UC needs to win to feel comfortable and still be in contention for an NCAA tournament at large bid?
So you're saying the next 9?
Next 9.
The next 9. So, well, without looking at where each one of those teams is in the net, I don't believe Utah is ranked very high in the net. I don't know about the others off the top of my head.
All top 100 teams.
All top 100 teams?
All top 100. The only team they play that isn't top 100 is the last game against Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State. Okay. So I'll say in the next 9, if they can go 6-3, that'll put them at 6-7. And then I'll feel like so that they're 10-4 now. I should know the damn record of the team, shouldn't I? 10-4.
10-5.
10-5. Yeah, 10-5.
38th in Ken Palm, 41st in net.
So, I mean, if they go 6-7, they're 16-12 with 7 to go. I'll take that right now. I think I'll take that right now. If they're after starting 0-4 in the league, if they can win 6 of the next 9, get to 6 and 7, and sit there at 16 and 12, at that point they'll be on the outside looking in, but I'll feel like they can still make a move. And if they would have
16 and 8 if they win 6 of the next 9.
Ryan, I'm bad at math, so
that's great. We all are sometimes.
So if they win, so that'd be, how did I get 16 and 8? How did I get 16 and 12? So all right, if there's, why did I do 16 and 12? Oh, because I wrote 6 and 8. Duh. All right, so if there's 16 and 8 with 7 to go, I'm in. And I mean, let's be honest, if they win 6 out of 9, they're playing well. And they have fixed some stuff. Right. So if I get a team that has won 6 out of 9 and are playing well enough to have won 6 out of 9, then I'll feel like, you know what, this team has a shot. Mm-hmm. And the team that I watch for a large chunk of November can win 6 of their next 9. You know, the difference between last year and this year had to be what they did in games at home. And to me, like, I was fortunate enough to fill in for Dan on the Arizona broadcast because he was in Pittsburgh with the Bengals, and Terry Nelson and I talked a lot about, like, last year they went 4-5 in Big 12 play, and every single one of those losses was by fewer than 10 points. The Iowa State game was not really that close, but they lost by 9. The rest of them were heartbreakers, right? You know, games that came down to a possession. So they've got to be better at home this year. They have 8 home games to go. They've obviously lost 2. They have to finish with a 7-3 mark at home or something like that, like a 6-4, 7-3, 6-4 to me, worst case, because winning on the road is so tough. But yeah, man, I mean, if you give me so 9, what is the 9th game in that stretch? I got Colorado, Arizona State, Texas Tech, BYU.
West Virginia is the last game of that stretch, a home game. You got at UCF, and then I think West Virginia at home.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I look at the next 9. I see the last game of that being Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, Texas Tech, BYU, Utah, West Virginia, UCF, BYU, Utah.
Okay, yeah, that BYU, Utah is the last stretch.
Because that would then after that 9, you have a real tough back-to-back road games at Iowa State, at West Virginia. So you've got to be minimum 6-3 in the next 9, because let's be real, if they steal one of those next 2, they're probably not going to win both. And then, you know, I mean, you're still going to have to go to Houston, but you're going to they play 4 of their last 5 at home. So get me 6-3. Even if they lose the next 2, you're then 16-10, and you get 4 of your last 5 at home. Like, you still have a shot. Like, that is the thing about this. I think, you know, it's the season now in college basketball starts so damn early that when we get to January, I think people think it's later than it is. They have 16 regular season games to go and the Big 12 tournament. So they do have time, and they are entering a stretch where they play some teams that are beatable, not as good as who they've played so far, but all of it's a moot point if they don't get some things fixed offensively, and if they don't get some things fixed just in terms of the basketball part of this on the floor. And it's got to start on Wednesday when they go to Colorado.
You've already hit on it, but Colorado up next, 87th in the net, 86th in Ken Palm, 65th offensively in Ken Palm, offensive efficiency, 125th defensive efficiency. A team that Cincinnati matches up with really well in terms of what they do well and what Colorado doesn't do well. From a pure basketball standpoint, as someone who is struggling to find positives with the team right now, what are you looking for from UC at Colorado to make you feel good about the next stretch of games?
What am I looking for? I think we're all looking for the same thing. We're looking for a level of offensive proficiency that we haven't yet seen this year, against good teams at least, and we can debate whether or not Colorado is good. It's interesting. Colorado is one of those teams that beat Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken, right? In Maui. Yeah, it was when Connecticut lost 3 straight games. They played Iowa State in that event and got destroyed, right? Weird non-conference game. I got a chance to see a little bit of them against Arizona State and got smoked. I know they lost a tough one to UCF and then lost yesterday to West Virginia. So I guess what I'm looking for is this. You would expect a team that has lost 4 straight games at home to come out with a level of desperation. Does UC play with that desperation early? And can they, like, you saw this on Saturday. They started off 8-2, right?
Yeah.
And crowds into it, and it's like, all right, here we go. And they can't make it last. And suddenly, you're thinking it's 8-2. Bill Self is going to have to call a timeout. Instead, West calls the first timeout because his team gives up an 8-0 run. Same thing against Xavier. They won the game, but got off to a killer start, and then they're still trailing at halftime. They haven't been able to sustain anything out of the gate. So let's see against Colorado, a really desperate team playing at home. I'm sure looks at UC and says, well, there's our first Big 12 win, and then we could use that as a jump start to our season. I don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like for a Colorado basketball game, but I want to see the first 10 minutes. Can UC match what Colorado brings to the table? And if the answer is yes, in the first 4 to 5 minutes, can they sustain it for the next 4 to 5 minutes? We will see. And I also feel like in the 2 road games they have played in the Big 12, turnovers have been a major issue, and bad shooting teams, which this has been, cannot afford to be fast and loose with the basketball.
Right.
Against Baylor, with 6 minutes to go, they still had more turnovers than buckets. That can't be the case. And so on the road, they've had all sorts of issues. But to me, that's been the one that has stood out the most. It's one thing to not be a good shooting team, but if there's one lesson you can learn from Mick Cronin's teams, it's they might not be a great shooting team, but they're not giving up easy points because their guards turn it over or because they have guys who are taking, poor care of the basketball. They were always really, really good at ensuring maybe they would shoot at 35%, but they weren't going to give you a bunch of extra possessions because they turned it over. We need to see more of that from this team starting on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think you hit on it too with the scoring droughts. Going back to Kansas, up 23-16 with, I think, 5:41 left in the first half. They only scored 3 points over the next 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Down 38-37 with right around 7 minutes left in the game. They only scored 3 points over the next 6 minutes, with that being, I think Josh Reed made a 3 with right around a minute left. That just can't happen in a league like this. And then you're averaging 12 turnovers a game during this losing streak. And it's like you combine that with the poor shooting, and it's just a snowball effect down the hill. So
yeah, and also the poor shooting, at some point, really good teams make tough shots.
Yeah.
I mean, really good teams. I was watching Kentucky and Mississippi State on Saturday night, which was a game played in the 90s, and dudes were just making shots with hands in their faces and splitting double teams and scoring. And, when's the last time with this team that you said to yourself, tough shot, but it went in, right? That sort of thing. Yeah. Where, hey, you know what? I mean, we talk about it with CMOS. Teams are defending him differently, but at some point, you got to make contested shots. At some point, you have to make tough shots. That's a part of this, man. Kansas made some really tough contested shots in that game. Same for Arizona. Tough contested shots in that game. That's got to happen. And no better time for it to happen than starting on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Well, Mo, as always, we appreciate your insight, and hopefully we're having a little bit different conversation with more positive vibes the next time we talk.
God, I hope so. I can't keep doing this. I've lost a lot of sleep over the last couple of days, Ryan.
Yeah, same here. It's one of those things where, especially with Kansas, the team plays so well defensively, but you scored 40 points. I mean, hopefully I figure it out. As Moti would say, you got to figure the damn thing out and move on.
Let's hope so. Good to be with you, Ryan. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mo. See you soon.
See you, buddy. All good.